Before we get into the video, I need you guys to do me a favour. Number 1, like the video. Also comment, let me know your thoughts on the story. When you think about football hooliganism or events that create the atmospheric incident, nothing more epitomises the action than the March 13th, 1985 6th round FA Cup tie between Millwall and Luton Town. Now, Millwall Bushwackers at this point had already cemented themselves as a top-tier firm with the rise of the English game. Luton, despite being a bigger football club at the time, had a lesser-known faction, being the MIGs. Luton MIG were unique in the sense that the MIG took over from the faction Bother Boys, who enjoyed the skinhead and mod fashion, but often took influences from other ethnicities like Jamaican culture. This meant that the MIGs were a more multi-ethnicity faction, which meant that other smaller factions would either join forces when preparing a scrap during big games. Case in point, Luton vs Millwall. Now, the FA Cup tie was to be played at Luton Town's Kenilworth Road Stadium, which meant that the MIG, which stood for Men in Gear, had the home advantage. Now, sales assistants, mechanics, DJs, sport coaches, builders, teachers from different estates around Luton and further afield had made the journey to Kenilworth Stadium. Now, Millwall bosses had asked Luton to make the sold-out match be an all-ticket event due to the whispers of violence erupting. Now, the suggestion was ignored, and every firm in London turned up for the match. As for Millwall, they turned up with twice as many fans they usually had for home games, thousands of people. To put it into perspective, Kenilworth Stand, home to away supporters, could house roughly 4,000 to 5,000 people, yet 8,000 fans were crammed on a terrace behind the goal. Now, prior to kick-off at roughly 5 p.m, police received reports that Millwall Bushwackers had descended on Luton Town Centre in droves. They began to smash pub and shop windows and also antagonise innocent commuters that were in town. Now, police attempted to redirect these people directly to Kenilworth Road, but they had failed. Now, by 7 o'clock, most of the fans were inside the stadium. However, enthusiastic and overzealous fans were perched outside and even on the scoreboard, trying to get into the stadium, despite the stadium already being over capacity. Now, the turnstiles were then broken, so fans then clambered over the fence and rushed Luton Town supporters, who were positioned on the Oak End terrace. Now, Millwall Bushwackers and Luton MIGs began to launch missiles at each other, taunt each other, and also chant and accost each other's firm and belittle them. So then the football teams had entered the pitch, and they were quickly rushed back down the tunnel as complete and utter disarray and chaos unfolded. Millwall Bushwackers and Luton MIGs had set up on the bobby stand. Seats were ripped from the ground by 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 men and women at a time. Now, because each terrace was now filled with both Bushwackers and the MIG hooligans, a notice appeared on the scoreboard asking for calm and to say that the match would not start until fans returned to their allocated seats. Now, men and women, some innocent and some not so innocent, were struck with things like cans, nails, coins. In retrospect, Luton fans were tempted to flee the melee. However, due to even more fans entering the stadium, it was so packed that there was nowhere to run or hide or even crouch for safety. Now, once the match finally began, it took only 14 minutes for another scrap to erupt. Again, both teams were then taken off the pitch for 25 minutes. Ultimately, Luton won the match 1-0, and that was thanks to Brian Stein's goal at the 31-minute mark, and that was all it took. So, following the final whistle and the 1-0 victory for Luton, Millwall Bushwackers invaded the pitch. Now, both Luton and Millwall players sprinted for the dressing room as fast as they could. One idiotic person rushed towards Luton's coach, Trevor Hartley, and they tried to clutch him in their grabs, but Hartley managed to wiggle free and crouch, and then he sprinted as fast as he could to the tunnel along with the players. Now, Bushwackers and the MIGs then made for the Bobby Moore stand once more, and again they began to rip the seats right from the ground, and the fence at the front of the stand were forced down with the weight of all these people. Now, the ripped seats that were no longer bolted to the ground were then launched as missiles, hitting 12 people. So the police could not cope with the sheer numbers of people, so they then began to step back before they then regrouped and then charged in waves, baton drawns. Again, a wave of police versus Bushwackers and Luton MIGs. It was like a free-for-all by 3 different factions, including the police of course. And when the police finally began to get some form of order, fans were then said to make makeshift plastic spears that were used from the plastic seats. In this incident, 81 people were injured and almost half of them were policemen. Even an officer had stopped breathing due to the chaos and his injuries, and he had to be resuscitated right on the pitch, while people still continued to use their legs, arms, fists and elbows on him. Now at the time, Margaret Thatcher says that the incident was down to people who lacked home training and of course parental guidance. Now when everybody was heading home, of course more violence ensued. That meant that some cars were overturned and smashed windows. Shops and home windows were also smashed. Now 31 people were arrested in the incident and they had to go to Luton's Magistrates Court the following morning. Now the majority of the 31 people who were detained were classed as supporters of Millwall and also Chelsea and West Ham United. The incident was so serious that Luton Town had actually been banned from the FA League Cup, and also they decided to ban away fans from attending away games for 4 years. Stay safe.